Hello, everyone, and welcome to AI ChatGPT, Friend or Foe, and it's brought to you by your friends at Hannon Hill. And they've done an excellent job of bringing together panelists who are all in on AI for the betterment and the benefit of higher ed marketers, and hopefully will educate and inform and inspire you to do the same. My name is Troy Singer, and I'll be your moderator for today, and I get to present and kind of keep the conversation going with the other panelists. We're going to introduce ourselves. I work for a company called Ring Digital, where we show colleges and universities how to go directly into the devices of the prospects, of the inquiries, and alumni of the people on your valued mailing list. We're also going to tell you what our favorite app is on our phone, which mine is XM. I know that's really boring, but it does enable me to listen to yacht rock all day long. Next, we have Caroline. Caroline, would you please introduce yourself?
Thank you, Troy. Thank you, Hannon Hill, for having me. My name is Caroline Dunn. I'm here to represent electrical engineering in generative AI and ChatGPT. I work at Wasiga. Wasiga, we sell PA systems for schools. So your morning announcements, your emergency notifications, your intercoms, we do the hardware and the software. My role is I'm Vice President of Marketing at Wasiga, and I hold 2 degrees in electrical engineering, a bachelor's and a master's degree, and an MBA in marketing. And my favorite app is my home app. And I don't actually even touch the home app. When I'm walking home, it gives me a push notification every time I get close to my house, and it says, "Would you like to unlock your front door?" And I click yes, and then my front door is unlocked, and I don't have to use my key, and I just walk right in.
Thank you, Caroline. I wasn't familiar with that, so I will definitely check it out. Bart Caylor, you are up.
I'm Bart Caylor. I'm the president and founder of Caylor Solutions. We're a marketing and branding agency for higher ed. Some of you might be familiar with some of my content on LinkedIn, as well as being the co-host with Troy Singer of the Higher Ed Marketer podcast. My favorite app, it's kind of like asking which of my children are my favorite, so it's not really fair. But I think that I'm going to go with the app Big. And I use Big a lot for, well, it looks like it's picking up the back. I do a lot of video emails. So I use a tool called BombBomb and another tool called SpokeNote. And I use those every day to send out emails to prospects and different people I'm trying to reach out to, just to kind of personalize it. So I always put their name on my phone, and Big lets me do that. And so that's what I like.
Thank you. Chris.
Hi there, I am Chris Rapozo. I'm the marketing specialist for Hannon Hill. We're the makers of Cascade CMS, a content management system for higher ed institutions, but we also serve government and finance and just anybody who needs a enterprise level content management system. But we also have Clive, our personalization tool. It's a web personalization tool that integrates with any CMS out there and shows targeted content to your audience, so each visitor sees the content that's most relevant to them. And my favorite app should be, or is, my Strava app. It's a running app that keeps me accountable and logs all the miles and just keeps me on track with my running goals.
Thank you, Chris. And Kyle.
Hello, everyone. I'm Kyle. I'm founder of Education Marketer. It's a fortnightly publication for marketers working in the higher education sector. And rather boringly, my favorite app probably has to be YouTube, really. I think we forget how miraculous YouTube is as a platform. You can go on any time and get a piece of content in any niche. And, you know, I grew up in the 90s and I love video games. And there was like one show on television every week that catered for that audience. But now 24/7, I can access this content anytime. So yeah, YouTube is very close to my heart.
Thank you, Kyle. Our time together is going to work like this. We're going to take the first 50 minutes for me to ask questions of our panel, and then we will also have the remaining 10 minutes where we will go over questions from you. So please utilize the Q&A section at the bottom of the screen. And we have questions for you in the form of polls. And our first poll question is, do you think ChatGPT is a friend or foe? And if you would, please take about 10 seconds and put in your answers quickly.
We can't vote.
I know. I was just going to say I was wanting to partake in said poll.
Well, I think that would be skewing the results since we all are friends. So, we'll get into your opinions here momentarily. So it looks like 67% friend, 5% foe, and 20% I don't know. And I think that those are good results. So thank you very much, everyone. I'm going to get the questions started out with, I think I'm going to pose this to Kyle. So Kyle, with the lower entry barrier for content creators and the influx of content due to ChatGPT, how can higher ed marketers distinguish and stand out with their content among all this commoditization?
It's a fascinating concept, isn't it? Right. I've been a content marketer for most of my professional career. Got about a decade's experience in higher ed marketing, and ChatGPT essentially levels that playing field, right? And in higher ed, we often refer to content as like this asset, a store of value. We want to see how it's performing. We want to see how it contributes to our marketing activity. When actually, if suddenly everyone can create content, that specialty of being a creator, it kind of goes down, and the value of content overall decreases. So I mean, really in this space, what makes us different in the future won't be the content we publish. It might be who actually publishes it. So for schools, one thing they probably need to be thinking about is, yes, using these generative AI tools to get that scale and get that efficiency and being able to create a lot of content. But they also need to be thinking about thought leadership, who's publishing it, who are these stars in the faculty, stars in their own immediate professional staff, who are they building up to have that profile? So when that content is published, it is read. So you could say that, content used to be this asset and store of value, but now the real value is in the audience that you attract, and audiences are attracted to people rather than the commodity of content. So I think these are things we need to be on the lookout for, because typically, and I know you all work in these higher ed environments, there's so much emphasis placed on more content, but there's relatively little thought given to audience building and how that adds to recruitment pipeline overall. So me as a content marketer, this is a huge red flag, and I'm acutely aware of the impact it could have for universities further down the road.
I think that's
Thank you, Kyle.
I think that's a great point, Kyle. And I'll just kind of add end on that, because one of the things that I think we need to keep in mind is the reason that content ends up being commoditized is because there is very little thought or refinement of what comes out of an artificial intelligence engine. So using ChatGPT and just saying, write a blog post about, math programs and the importance of going to, getting an actuarial degree. Well, you're going to get commoditized content because it's just going to go out and it's going to harvest commoditized content and pull it together. I think the secrets end up being in the fact that you really need to use this as a tool. And you need to use it as and learn how to prompt and learn how to be specific on your prompts, and then recognize that it's a draft. So start with the fact that, okay, this is a draft. This is like I ask a junior copywriter to give me a draft of something, and I've detailed out exactly what I want that to be. Instead of it being, someone on staff, it's actually, artificial intelligence. And so it's going to give me a draft that I can work with. And I might throw the draft out and say, no, this is nowhere near what I want. That's kind of the power of using this as a tool and starting to use it as that. And so I think that's one of the ways that we're going to avoid the commoditization, is we really see it as a tool as opposed to an answer for, hey, I want to pump out 100 articles a day, so I'm just going to press a button and do that. That's not going to work, and that's what's going to drive the commoditization of all of this.
I agree. We've seen tools like this and these approaches starting to be integrated into platforms like LinkedIn, haven't we? So LinkedIn's got a new tool available now that when you open the composer, it's asking some users off the bat, do you want to use AI? And if anything, that generates the sort of commoditization that we're talking about here. So your point there about using it as a draft is just bang on. If you just go for the straight result that comes out of these things with no communication, no conversation, no conversion with the chatbot, your output is just going to be mediocre at best.
And you're going to get penalized as well. I mean,
Hopefully, yes.
Yeah, there's going to be tools that are going to recognize it, because Bing, Google, as they get smarter, search engines are going to, they're going to tag these, and they're going to push them down because they recognize them as generative content. And so, again, it has to come back to it's a tool.
Yeah, and I agree. I wanted to chime in as well. Since there's so much content out there, you want to focus on quality over quantity at this time, right? And then utilize your subject matter experts that are walking the halls at your institutions. You have PhD professors, you have graduate students that know a particular topic so well, better than anybody else out there. And then if you focus on creating high quality, well-researched, accessible content, accessibility is key in this as well, to set your work apart from the purely generated AI generated content. And like Bart said, you never want to take the first draft that AI spits out, ChatGPT spits out for you, right? But I want to encourage everybody not to see ChatGPT and AI as a threat, but rather as a tool to help you with your content creation, expedite the writing process. And then just also make sure you know your audience and what speaks to them, and then personalize that content that comes out of that engine to speak directly to your key audiences, and then be the leader in your industry. Thought leadership is big, and then create authentic, well-researched content your audience craves and needs from you. And if you do that, you'll inevitably build trust with your followers, and they will spread the word for you as well.
I want to riff off of what Chris just said. That was a really good point. So my challenge in working with professors from universities is the way that they write, the way that they speak is in that very methodical format that you write research papers about. And it's not really something that the average Joe is going to understand. So why not take your original writing in the very, very bland way you're going to write it, and run it through ChatGPT and say, hey, make this available for the masses. Let's have, I want to take what I know and turn that into, hey, ChatGPT, help me turn that into something that's useful for the everyday person. So it's not just about generating original content, or unoriginal content, really, is I think what we're trying to say here. It's about that thought leadership, that riffing off of Kyle and Bart as well. It's about that thought leadership. And at your university, you definitely have that thought leadership, but sometimes it's just hard to get that message out in a way that somebody else can understand who doesn't have a PhD in that topic.
Mm. I mean, we'll probably tap on this momentarily, but you can tell ChatGPT, like you said, like which audience you want it to write for, what tone, and what is your typical customer look like, and it considers all of these things, and it will adjust the output as a result. It's quite remarkable, really.
Yeah, and I would just add too, we probably should have done this at the very beginning, but if you haven't used ChatGPT and you're on this, the best way to do it is to go to chat.openai.com, and you can sign up for a free account just to play with it. I would encourage you, if you haven't done that, to play with it. That you can go to the $20 a month and do the ChatGPT 4 and go a little bit deeper on that. But the best way to learn all of this is to actually just play with it and discover it. That's what we're all doing. I mean, I think it's funny that we're participating in a panel here as some kind of experts, when all we're all doing is figuring it out. So
we just play with it every day. Yeah.
Exactly.
So it sounds like that the distinction is going to still be with the author in the cleverness they're able to utilize their prompts. And it's really up to them to press enter or to put it up onto the web as a final product. So that's the way that we can overcome the commoditization. Love it and thank you. This next question, we're going to go to the poll question. Have you used ChatGPT?
All righty, let's see here.
I still can't vote.
I think it's just the participants. We'll answer the last question together on the air.
I think we've settled on 71 to 70% of our attendees have utilized ChatGPT, and that's awesome. Hopefully, we're going to inspire the remaining 30% to do it directly after we get off of the webinar. So when marketers usually look at ChatGPT and AI, I think it's more for content and it's more for writing creatively. But Caroline would like to know, since I consider you the brainiac, no offense to the gentleman, but you are an engineer and you utilize this with research. So would love to know some ways that you have used or ways that you've heard others have used AI and ChatGPT for research.
Thank you. Great question. I'm trying to write content for different industries. So education is one of those industries. Well, who's going to let me into school and just let me look through their stuff? Nobody. I'm trying to write content for hospitals. Nobody's going to let me into their hospital. Okay. But I want to know how things work at a hospital. But, is anybody going to let me in? Same with warehouses. So there are different industries. Generally speaking, they won't let somebody off the street just go in and look at their supply closets. Okay. So what I've used ChatGPT for is learning a lot about how hospitals work, or warehouses, or even schools work behind the scenes. And so I will research, for example, I wanted to research PA systems in hospitals, overhead paging specifically in hospitals. How does that work? Nobody's going to tell me that. So I went to ChatGPT and I said, hey, how does overhead paging work in hospitals? And it actually helps me understand, okay, well, overhead paging is used in these 4 ways in hospitals. And then I was able to take the product that I'm marketing and say, does my product do those things? And make examples of how my product does those 4 things. And it could be used in a hospital environment. So if you go through right now while you're on the webinar and do Google search overhead paging in hospitals, you'll see the article that I researched through ChatGPT, and then I put in examples of how my product does those things that you need for overhead paging in hospitals.
Yeah, that's a good point. The way you go about researching certain things that you may not be an expert on, and that way that helps you create or spits out the information, then you can tailor it to whatever you have for your own product to talk about that to your audience. And I also use it a lot for research, and actually I use it a lot with my Google Analytics. And so what I do is I identify high performing content on our website, and then I copy the URL of the content, and I ask ChatGPT to help me understand who this particular article resonates with. So that's my prompt. Who does the following article resonate with? And I plug in the URL of it, and then ChatGPT reads it in the background, and then it tells me who is it related to, or who relates with it. And then I ask it, what other content would be of interest to the people who like this article, so I can build up my content strategy and build off on what works in the process as I build up my content page.
Caroline, I think your example should give hope to any search engine optimizer who's listening right now, because obviously there's a lot of potential challenges to SEO going forward as a result of these tools. But your example there is like you've created this piece of web content that is found in Google as a result of using AI to create it. And rather than replacing it, well, I think some people were thinking, you kind of outline a case there. You can definitely use this tool to enhance your creation process and get a result off the back of it. I don't know if anyone else has tried these tools recently, but looking at the research angle, Bing has made public now accessible its chat tool, so it lives in your search results. And when you type in your query, like if I'm a student looking for a local degree to fit all these kind of crazy requirements, it will then create a piece of personalized content in search. But it does source where those citations come from, or how it's come to that decision. So it's not like it totally cuts off SEO, but I guess it's something to be mindful of, is that yes, we still have people going through the traditional sort of search methods, but there are this movement now of actually creating that content 100% personalized, dynamically generated in search as well. So, research could change over the next year quite a lot. And for universities, we've what do we normally have? Organic traffic in unis, between 35 to 60% acquisition, isn't it? You know, this potentially could cut into that. So there's lots of different arguments floating around, but it's quite an interesting time. There's definitely some sort of transitioning happening, I'd say.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. And I think to build on that, one thing that I would encourage you as you are playing with research is to make sure that you have it cite the sources. And so many times I will ask it a question and then ask it to give me reference to that. So an example recently is I had there's two examples. One, I was working with a university that had a president or the chancellor who'd passed away. He was quite prolific in his writings and well known. And so I was looking for a particular quote that he had said regarding the next future of, coming up. So I told it what I wanted, a quote from that person, and I said I needed a reference on that. And it was able to find that quote that was perfect for, an announcement from the president from a press release to reference this passing chancellor using that quote based on his writings. It would have taken forever to have somebody find that out. Another example was I have another school that has another famous writer who's connected to the school. And so I wanted to be able to highlight something on the homepage about, it's a faith-based school. And so this writer is an author that talks a lot about, he has, hundreds of books about this. And I needed one that talked about adventure. I wanted a quote that referenced adventure because the theme of the website was about utilizing the school, and part of their enrollment marketing was about adventure. And, within 3 seconds, I found the quote and the reference from the book that it was in, and I was able to use that in one of the mock-ups that we did. And so again, being able to find those perfect quotes, those perfect elements, being able to prompt it in such a way with the references, I think is going to be one of the ways that research is going to be really important.
Would you agree that it's a good way to fill the gaps? That's the way I kind of use it. Like you have a rough outline or an approach or an idea, like that's the human stuff, right? The strategy and the approach. And then I guess like bricks in a wall or cement, I don't know where you want to look at it, but I think it's very good at filling the gaps and being almost invisible. Because I've certainly written like copy in the past and I pulled in like a definition or something, and you can't detect that if it's embedded within creative work. It's when you generate something from scratch, just own the AI, it's quite noticeable. But yeah, I think filling in the gaps might be a good way of considering how to use these tools.
I think it's also worth noting that, and I saw a couple questions that are coming across as well, that ChatGPT's information is not 100% correct. Yeah, that's exactly right. And that's why I always ask for some kind of reference and citation. But I also think you have to remember that at least ChatGPT 3.5 is limited to information prior to 2021. And so a lot of these generative models, and maybe Carolyn can talk more about that, but they only go up to a certain point. So there's plugins that you can get to put in and reference web and different things like that. But be careful when you're doing, research that's going to be timely, that might have happened in the last 2.5, 3 years. I don't know about 4, if 4 is more relevant. Those will change. I'm sure that within the next few months that issue is going to go away, but you're going to need to just kind of be aware that if you're asking it for your references and things like that, you're going to have to probably do a little bit of fact checking on yourself just to make sure it's accurate.
Yeah, 100%. And I want to encourage everybody to drop those questions into the Q&A section of this webinar, because we'll have a Q&A after we go through our pillar questions.
Is it still true that if you use the free version, you have access to 3.5, but in order to get access to 4, then you have to have the paid membership, which I think is around $20 per month?
Yeah, that's correct.
The difference between the two is noticeable. It's worth the money if you're planning to use this as part of your workflow.
Just as another caveat about accuracy or non-accuracy, some of the information there's a lot of disclaimers on there. Hey, might not be accurate. I've seen a lot of inaccurate stuff, and I think it doesn't replace doing, a little bit of fact checking on your own somewhere else as well. So I had one of the research articles I was working on, it came back as very biased. in a certain political way. And I looked at that, I was like, well, I can't publish this. I can't use this at all. So there is this bias depending on what's out there or, as of 2 years ago, what's out there as well. So yeah, I definitely want to be very, do your own citations or do your own checking or ask it in a different way and see how it comes out. So there's a lot of finesse, nuances. And, as we keep on harping on, okay, this is how you prompt it, you've got to work on, there's a lot of trial and error on how you prompt it.
We need to be careful with the training data as well. I mean, I've seen quite a few articles, a lot of them coming from the Wall Street Journal, actually, about the actual sets of data these things are trained on. And, I think there's one by Google that's had 200 instances of copyrighted material, hateful content, racist content in these training sets. And I really feel we need to be careful, because when we are asking queries of this stuff, this is the source material that it's basing a response on. And these things will improve over time, but we're in the Wild West at the moment. It's really early days. I think we need to be astute in the stuff that it's being produced for us.
Again, it's a draft. So
yeah, 100%. Yeah.
And that's why on the panel we're saying, we use it for research. It's not the end all be all. It's not going to replace my job anytime soon. At least I hope not. So.
So it sounds like it is up to the author, but ChatGPT is the most powerful assistant one can have, and it still is much more advantageous to lean in and utilize it. We just need to be aware of what we put out there as a result.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
I'm going to answer a quick question that somebody just posted. Kayleen, can you share some resources or information about the resources it's trained on? I don't know about you guys, but I think it's just trained on everything that is on the internet. I mean, it's anything publicly available on the internet is what it gets trained on. And that's what the challenge is that it's everything. And so that's where it has no wisdom. It just pulls everything.
It's a merciless mirror to humanity.
Exactly.
Thank you. I think one of the phenomenons that is amazing to people that are paying attention is how quickly this has been adopted by our world. So if you would, Chris, could you speak on how has ChatGPT been adopted by marketers and what factors have contributed to this rapid I don't know how else to say it. It's just taken our world by storm.
Yeah, it has spread like wildfire since its release in November 2022, which was about 6 months ago. And ChatGPT reached about 100 million active users in two months and is currently at 1.16 billion active users. And just to compare that to some other technology that they came out over the recent years, the internet, for example, which was released in 1993, it took 7 years to get to 100 million users. And Facebook, everybody used Facebook, which was released in 2004, it took 4.5 years to get to 100 million users. And our beloved iPhone, which was released in 2007, took 3.5 years to reach 100 million users, right? So ChatGPT within 2 months, 100 million users is pretty significant and should not be ignored. And that also reminded me of what I've learned during an entrepreneurial class at the university once, the diffusion of innovation theory by E.M. Rogers, which a lot of you heard of that before, which basically describes the pattern of speed at which new ideas or products spread through the population, right? So usually they are the innovators, the first 2.5% that are the ones that wait in line for an iPhone for 3 days to get it. They want this thing, they want to run with it. And then the early adopters, which are 13.5%. And those are followed by the early majority and late majority, which are around 34% of the population. And then the laggards, which are 16%. Those are the ones stuck in their ways. They use fax to this day instead of email to communicate. But with the law of diffusion, it tells us that if a product wants to make mass market acceptance or reach a mass market acceptance, it has to cross this tipping point, also called a chasm, which is between the early adopters and the early majorities, which you have to reach about 15 to 18% to gain market penetration. And if we take the current internet users, which are approximately 5.16 billion users, and compared it to the current ChatGPT users, 1.16 billion users, that means that around 22% of current internet users already use ChatGPT, which tells me that they crossed the chasm like within 6 months and have penetrated the market and is well on its way to become mainstream now. In my opinion, that's remarkable. Like no other technological advanced thing has done that before. And I'm saying that ChatGPT is here to stay, and it's well on its way to, you know, to take over. So I would say everybody on this call, just embrace it, learn it, run with it, and become the expert before the train leaves the station and you have to chase after it.
The thing that got me, and by the way, I'm just going to congratulate you there. That was some super maths. you spent some time there. I'm impressed.
Thank you.
The thing that got me with this, and yeah, it's totally adopted. It's well into the mainstream. I thought it would just end up being a back-end technology and built into existing infrastructure. So it would appear in like social media as an assistant, or a different app as an assistant, or some way to power a platform differently. But it's become a destination, right? People are going to it like it's a social platform or some sort of other web platform to get things done. And this solidified for me when I watched, and I'm sure some of us here watched it as well, when the founder of OpenAI did his TED Talk. He showed you what you could achieve through this single interface. So he asked it to produce the ideas for a meal. So it produces that. It produces an image for the meal, all in the same window. Then it creates a shopping list for what is required to create the meal, again, in the same app. And then finally, he posts it to Twitter, all through that one screen. So normally you've got 7 different windows open to do that, 7 different apps, but he's just achieved it through one interface. And I look at this and think it's like the advent of mobile. It's like the advent of the internet. It's even like, you know, when we first got guided user interfaces, like clicking icons on a screen, it's a complete change to how we interact with digital tools. I haven't seen that before, not in my professional career. And I think it can be kind of reduced down to something quite trivial, but actually to see that happen is incredible. And usually when there's an interface change, there's like a huge, well, people get rich or certain directions happen, right? We've seen it with the iPhone when we went mobile first. And I think we're going to see something very similar with this technology if we continue going along this track. So yeah, your figures are bang on, and it's a storm, and I think it's here to stay.
Yeah, it does seem like it's turning into more of a utility or a platform, as opposed to, you know, the old Microsoft Clippy, where, you know, it was just a little
Love
thing set in the
Clippy.
corner. I know Clippy was kind of cool. But I do think that you're going to see, just as, I mean, with ChatGPT and OpenAI releasing their plugins a few weeks ago, and all of a sudden it seems like, you know, every day I'm seeing another AI empowered tool that on the back end, you know, whether it's now integrated into Google Sheets and Google Docs, or if you can, you know, all these different tools that it's going to start becoming a part of it. It is going to be more like just the infrastructure of electricity getting wired to your house now, as opposed to having to go someplace to get what you need. I mean, you're going to go one place, but it's just going to run everything. I mean, like you said, whether it's a meal planning with recipes and shopping lists and posting it to Twitter, or actually, you know, to Caroline's point earlier about her app, the Home app, being able to integrate that with it and make smart decisions about what's going on, even if you're not home and on vacation, that things can automate. So.
I just wanted to, we had talked before this, and I just wanted to point out, as the electrical engineer on this call, AI has existed since the 1950s. Okay, we've been waiting for ChatGPT forever, and but the difference is ChatGPT is just a lot different from the previous AIs that we saw. So for example, when Alexa came out, the Amazon Alexa, that speaker thing came out, it was supposed to be like this game changer thing. It hasn't changed anything for me really, other than I can turn on my lights, and by saying, Alexa, turn on my lights. So it was coding on Alexa or working with Alexa, which I did back in 2018 or so, 2019 or so. It basically, I would code it to basically regurgitate back what I told it. So I basically coded it to, when I say this, you do that. And it wasn't intelligent, but it was what AI was back in 2018, 2019. It didn't pull from different sources. You just had to put in the information and just regurgitated it back out to you. That's the difference. And that's why ChatGPT is a watershed versus an Alexa.
I wish we had a poll on this, but I wonder how many people get more frustrated with Alexa now than they did prior to the launch of ChatGPT, because I have no patience for it. If it can't answer my really complicated query, I'm off, you know. So yeah, Amazon really dropped the ball on this one. I thought they would have been a competitor, but clearly not.
So it sounds like that if you haven't adopted it yet, you should, because if not, you're going to be left behind, because the world is bringing it into their lives very quickly. I also want to remind everyone that Hannon Hill brought us together for a reason, and that's because we love sharing and talking about ChatGPT and AI. So please take a look at our names, and you can link to us on LinkedIn. And at the end of our time today, we'll put up the contact information for everyone. And we all invite you to connect with us, because we just love talking about this. Our next poll question: have you educated your leadership about ChatGPT?
I wish there was an open box that everybody could add a little comment with that.
They can put it in the chat. They can.
Yeah, if you want to put that in the chat of the questions, I would love to hear. I mean, I'm sure that your provosts and others are talking about it from a student perspective, that, you know, hey, the professors are going nuts because there's too many, you know, papers getting turned in that are AI. But I'd just like to hear what everybody's saying on that. So
That's
no
a
one's
really
had a comment.
interesting result. I thought it would be the other way.
Okay, so Mallory says her chat's disabled. So some universities are putting blocks in on accessing that. I'm just curious how many people are also facing that, especially if you're in the country of Italy. Kyle, isn't that part of it in the EU?
Italy's banned the use of ChatGPT. Yeah.
Yeah.
We don't mess around in Europe.
No, I guess not.
In case you don't see the result,
Mallory said that the chat is disabled. So Chris, I don't know if you want to turn that on in the chat, or maybe it's
There's
just
a question that's come in
I
about
put everything to the Q&A.
Okay.
there's a question that came in earlier about what you should be considering in terms of the legalities around ChatGPT. So we'll save that to the end, but I'll bounce off that Italy example and what the EU's got planned in a moment.
Great.
thank you, everyone. The result is 29% yes, that they have talked to their leadership about ChatGPT. Bart, I know you the best on this, and I love being able to give you this question, because I know you could probably take 2 hours and offer many answers to it, but please offer some tips and hacks that you've discovered around AI and ChatGPT that our marketers can use effectively within higher ed.
Yeah, you'll be surprised how much you can do. And again, it goes back to just playing around. You know, early in the March Madness a couple months ago, I was you know, watching basketball on a Sunday afternoon, and you know, needed to kind of come up with some ideas for marketing ideas. And so I started prompting ChatGPT, and this was a very specific faith-based school. And one of the ways faith-based schools, their audiences, I always look for where's the watering holes for the audiences. And a lot of times they're in local churches. And so I just asked ChatGPT, give me 5 ideas for, you know, reaching out through marketing to, you know, build relationships with local influencers and churches. It gave me 5 ideas. I said, this is good. Give me 5 more. And at the end of 2 hours, at the end of the basketball game, I had 40 pages of content that had everything oriented by traditional undergrad, graduate school, online students, you know, all kinds of information that I basically have turned into kind of a onboarding document that, you know, when I'm meeting with certain types of schools, here are some ideas what might work in your particular institution. And so I find it, you know, good for generating ideas, good for generating drafts. It becomes a virtual assistant, a tool for me. I've played around with Midjourney and Dolly as far as generating some images and some, just trying to figure out, some creative ways of leveraging it through that way. Also, I think just the idea of being able to kind of look at it when you're kind of stumped on something and saying, as Caroline indicated earlier, rewrite this for this particular audience. Or, sometimes if I need to copy fit something, I did a newspaper recently, and I was probably, 60 words over where the columns would fit. And I didn't want to reduce the content. I didn't want to do the old trick of tightening up the kerning. And so I said, rewrite this article to 387 words. And it was able to do that. And so it's things like that that are hacks that I've been using ChatGPT for. And again, I keep going back to, I look for it to save me time so that I can focus my efforts on relationships, on things that only I can do as a human that require wisdom and other thoughts. But when it comes to just being able to get down and getting some drafts and getting some assistance, that's what I'm using the hacks for.
Yeah. Somebody here told me earlier about sometimes your content creator, you ask somebody in your institution that has a higher, educational level than others, and their content that they give you is possibly on a reading level that's above your audiences. And I actually sat down with my CEO, Kat Leingen, she's here, shout out to Kat, yesterday to play around with ChatGPT, and we did a copy of an excerpt of our academic paper, and we asked ChatGPT to identify the reading level of this particular piece. And then we asked ChatGPT to write it to a 6th grade reading level, for example, in order to, I don't want to say dumb it down, but make it more digestible for our target audiences, who are, let's say, traditional students who don't have the academic background as a PhD level person who wrote a particular piece. That's how I use it. Of course, I used it for the ChatGPT webinar announcement to help me write out that announcement piece, and social media ads, cold emails, and website personalization, of course. I always use it for persona building. So it doesn't matter really what industry you're in. You all marketers here, your target audiences, your personas, but you can always ask ChatGPT to give you, build out a persona for a particular, let's say it's an adult learner who wants to go into college and finish their degree. You may have an idea what the persona looks like and what they're interested in, but ChatGPT may spit out some other information that you may have not thought about, and then you can build out your content in a way that's relevant to your target audience that you may have not thought about.
One of the biggest hacks for me, it has to be telling ChatGPT what it gets wrong. When I look on LinkedIn how people are responding, one of the groups who, I think fear is the wrong word, but are most concerned about ChatGPT or engage with it are copywriters. And there's a range. There's usually a copywriter who's kind of leaning into it, and then there's the other set who are perhaps a little bit more cautious around it. And some of the examples I've seen is usually like the authors put in like one line of text and then showed the results, and the result's awful, and it goes, "Oh, I'll never replace a human." Well, I'm trying to think in our day-to-day lives when we're briefing clients or agencies. If you gave an agency a one-line brief, of course the output's going to be pretty terrible. I mean, Bart, if I went to you with like one line of copy and said, go and do this, you immediately come back to me and go, actually, can we have a conversation? Can we flesh out what is required? Right. It's the same with an AI. And if it gets it wrong, you tell it, well, okay, you went wrong here. Can you improve it? It's a back and forth process. It's a conversation. It's never a case of just like a single prompt and getting things done that way. So as soon as I start thinking about it more like that, that's when the good results or the better results started coming out of the system. So yeah, work with it like you would an assistant.
And I think sometimes, to answer one of the questions that's outstanding right now, is that you have to do that several times. I mean, some of my chat, back and forth, I mean, I might go back 15 times to say, improve this, change this, edit this. As long as you're staying within the one thread of the ChatGPT, the OpenAI interface, it will remember everything within that thread. And so you can go back even, days later and be able to pick up the conversation where you were, to kind of continue to train it on what you are specifically looking for. And a lot of times the best practices is start the prompt with, act as if you are a higher ed marketing expert, or act as if you are an electrical engineer. Starting with that to give it some persona will oftentimes generate better results.
Yeah, you need to tell it what part you want it to play. It's a performer, isn't it?
Yeah.
So yeah, like I was a good unlock for me as well. I just thought of myself as like a theatre director, and on the stage as like the actors and the performers, and they're very talented. They've got a lot of knowledge, but until you give them direction, they don't know what to do. Right? It's the same with this technology. So yeah, conversation all the way.
Yeah, and you can teach it to adopt or get close to your writing style. Let's say you have an article you've written, an email, a social media post. You can upload that into ChatGPT, ask it to read it, and then ask it to write a particular blog post or announcement in the writing style that you just fed it and ask it to learn.
I saw this a chat on Facebook the other day. Somebody said that they were, in a marketing organization and their website needed to be updated. And they're a US company, they're marketing to Americans, US people. And they said that some of the copy on the website had been written by non-native English speakers from outside of the US. And they wanted to get the content more, like what you would expect to see from a US company. And so I suggested, hey, just run it through ChatGPT and say, hey, rewrite this for a US audience. And actually some people got mad at me for saying that because there were people on the discussion who do copywriting for a living, and they were hoping to get paid to do this. But wouldn't it be better to not necessarily do this yourself, but perhaps in the future, hire somebody who is good at ChatGPT, who can do this in half the time for half the cost, and be able to, do it quicker, faster, cheaper for you. And then I think that's how you're going to see kind of jobs kind of evolve with this ChatGPT.
Yeah, I know that's been kind of the buzz phrase is prompt engineer. The idea that somebody who understands how to write the prompts and understands how to get the most out of these generative AI tools is going to be a skill set that, I'm on the marketing advisory board for a marketing program out West. And, we met with the faculty and met with several other business leaders, and they were asking, what should we be teaching our students? And we went off in little subgroups, and one of the other business owners and I kind of joked about ChatGPT, and he's like, yeah, if I could have a graduate right now that understood how to do that, I'd hire him in a heartbeat. And, they have a leg up on that. And, I tentatively went back to the professors and said, yeah, this is what we think. And all the other business leaders said, yes. And yeah, we're using it already in our businesses. We need students that understand it, who haven't been, their hands haven't been slapped by it, that they actually are learning how to use a tool. And again, it's not going to replace anybody anytime soon, but it's going to be a skill set that we all need to have.
Thank you. We are at about 10 before the top of the hour. I would like to prompt all of our listeners, all of our attendees, if you have a question, to please put it in at this time, and we'll get to them as quickly as we can. As we're waiting for those questions to come in, well, we do have one, and it says that Bart is typing an answer to it. Bart, if you wouldn't mind,
I haven't typed
just running
it
it
yet.
through
I'll just say it.
ChatGPT.
Yeah, I was copying and pasting right quick. No,
please read it and answer it.
The question is, if someone tries to correct the info ChatGPT tells you, does ChatGPT automatically assume the info you tell it is correct? And then does it take that new correction into account when it's providing information to someone else? If so, would this be a vulnerability in its intelligence? And that's a great question. When I chat with GPT, it is only my conversation with it. So the overall structure of the OpenAI system is not affected by input that I'm doing with it live or anyone else is. It's only going to be relevant to that conversation that I have with it. There are things built into OpenAI system that if I give it poor information or ask it to do something that is outside the bounds of what is within their their ethical structure that they've built. It will tell you that. It will say, I'm sorry, I can't do that because of the rules around this. Now, as far as if I give it incorrect information, will it continue down that path with me? I'm not sure. I've not tested that out yet, but I think that I think that's a great question. So.
Next question is, how would you put ChatGPT knowledge and experience into a resume?
I mean, just like anything else, really. I mean, the experience, the projects that you've used it with, portfolios, examples, maybe even get ChatGPT to write your resume for you. I mean, that is an option too. But yeah, I just think it's just like any other skill, really. And how do you prove any other skill? You show like examples of that, don't you? I don't think it needs to be that complicated.
Yeah, and you can even copy and paste the job description into ChatGPT and ask it to write you.
Give me an example of what I need to do, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that whole recruitment industry is probably under threat by this. The amount of like perfectly tailored application letters now is going to be crazy. I just thought of that now off the back of that.
So I want to go back to the previous question about if does ChatGPT believe you, or does it take you as fact? So I haven't personally known an example of this myself, but I've seen this in the news several times where people using ChatGPT accidentally put in proprietary information. So an example of that would be, let's say I'm a recruiter, or I'm going to offer somebody a job. Right. So I'm gonna ask ChatGPT, hey, write an offer letter, to this person for this position. I might accidentally put on there what position is, what company it is, and how much it pays per year. Does ChatGPT take that information, and now they know if you work at this company at this level, you're going to make this kind of money, and then put that into their database and use it somewhere else where somebody else down the line unknowingly says, so what's the average salary of a project manager? So that's another warning about ChatGPT is don't put in personal information or information you wouldn't want getting out, because I don't know that. I don't know, it's not going to use it with somebody else for something else too.
I mean, I don't know the direct answer, but I think there's a lot of concern around that. I mean, the EU is working on its AI Act, and it's directly like attacking that issue. No one knows what's going on with that data behind the scenes, and there's a potential that how many users was it, Chris? At 1.6 billion users. We're all training this thing for free. Some of us are not paying, but we're training this thing for free. We're giving it all this information about ourselves, and let's also be honest. Some people are using it as a personal therapist. Like, what's happening to that personal information? That you think about the ramifications of that, and there's no grand act in place to help us steer a course through that. There's also the issues of copyright. There was a case in the US recently, a graphic novel couldn't be copyrighted because its images were generated by Midjourney. And the ruling was, unless there's some significant element of human creativity or editing of those images, it can't be copyrighted. So does that mean that the work that we create for our brands cannot be copyrighted further down the line? So again, there's no answer to these things, but they're all issues that will be debated. Well, and they are being debated right now. But I think we'll start to get a few more sort of answers probably in the next 6 months. But yeah, there's a lot of stuff that needs to be set at the moment.
Yep.
Thank you. Does ChatGPT start to tailor its responses to you over time? I think we're going over this, but
yeah, as long as you keep it in one thread, you can keep it tailored toward that thread. And I've actually seen some people who actually go through and each thread is labeled as higher ed marketer, lawyer, whatever prompt you've asked it to do, they just keep going back to that thread to stay within that conversation. But yeah, so that's the way I think it's been used.
That's a nice idea.
This is labeled as a comment. In my experience, ChatGPT will attempt to include the facts when responding, but will continue to reference its larger data set. Example, claiming it is now the year 2109 and humans are using time travel for vacations.
Again, it's pulling data from the mass of humanity. So That's why it's a tool. You got to
It's our
double check
fault.
everything.
Yeah.
It's worldwide. I mean, it's the Wild West.
Where do you see the biggest pitfall of an institution in higher ed marketing not taking advantage of ChatGPT?
Scale and speed, I think. I mean, look at I'm trying to think of like a higher ed example. I guess if you needed to create a new website for a faculty or a project, think of how long you normally have to take to create content for each of those pages and things. I think something like ChatGPT could just accelerate that process by a factor of 10. I've even seen apps using the same sort of large language models to power creator content. There's an app called supercreator.ai, and it can help you just by putting in like the topic you want to speak about. It can then generate scripts for 10 videos. It generates the backgrounds in those videos, and you can talk to camera and create this stuff at scale and at speed. And sure, you're not like a creator like Mr. Beast, but we don't all need that sort of output, do we? Sometimes you just need a video on a topic that's personable, it's you doing it. AI can help you do that. So scale and speed are the key words here for me.
I think you're going to start seeing more schools that are utilizing AI to basically create hyper-personalized content for students. And so being able to imagine, being able to take your database, and the students have indicated the programs they're interested in. They have some other information. I mean, we all have a lot of information on the students. Being able to run that through and actually generate personalized emails that talk to them as if they were individually written by each counselor. At the top of the funnel, if you've got 50,000 students in your prospect list, imagine sending out 50,000 personalized emails. That's more than just, your name here type of thing. So I think somebody's going to start doing that very soon. I anticipate even this fall, you're going to start seeing content going out from some schools that are doing that.
I mean, I'm already seeing it coming through in sales emails to me. Yep. Frighteningly good, actually.
Yeah. But I also
and
think
Bart, go ahead.
I was just going to say, the other thing I was going to say is I did my first website in 1994, and my first higher ed website was in 1997. And so I'm an old man, but I remember it was the same exact thing. I would talk to schools and they'd be like, why in the world would we want to be on the internet? I mean, there's just no reason why we would need to be on the World Wide Web. The information superhighway is not for higher education. Well, look 25 years later. And so that's where we're going to see it. In 25 years, people are going to say, I can't imagine that we ever thought that we were going to run a university without, generative AI. What was that all about? I think that's where we're at.
Yeah.
Bart, to your point, and I know that you've experimented with that personalization at scale, you're utilizing plugins to help your ChatGPT connect with Google Sheets. And we haven't really talked about the plugins, but that enhances your experience and your ability tenfold. So it's not just the AI, but also the plugins that are available. And that's increasing by hundreds every day.
Yeah, I just saw a video the other day that there's I signed up for the wait list. I'm not on it yet, but OpenAI has released you can upload you could upload an Excel CSV file. And you can basically say, I want you to analyze this and give me these types of results back. And so imagine if you've got, 50,000 of your alumni in there and you want to start asking questions about, tell me about what year these majors were the most prevalent in, so that I can put together a donation email about this engineering program that we're going to do for the part of our capital campaign. That type of, being able to get that result in 5 seconds is a whole lot different than going to your institutional, research group and asking that and getting it a month later. So
we should make a point as well, is to say most of the people on the call, because you work for universities, I imagine you're on the Microsoft suite. Microsoft have rolled out Copilot into all of their apps. And if you're using the latest version of Office 365, you can go into Excel and have a chat with it. You can go into PowerPoint and drop a Word doc into it, and it will turn it into a beautiful presentation for you in a matter of seconds. And this is all the same sort of technology that's running in the background. So these tools are already at your fingertips. As long as you've got the latest version of that software, you could go and use them right now.
Kyle, you also mentioned a website earlier that I didn't catch. Would you mind mentioning it again and or putting it into the chat? It was somewhere, it was the last comment, and I'm sorry, I meant to ask you to do it directly after.
Sorry, I missed that.
You've given a lot of information. I apologize for waiting 3 or 4 minutes afterwards to ask you to do that.
It's okay, no problem. I'll be on LinkedIn if people want to get that off me directly. Just remind me what it was and I'll be there.
Very good. Our final question, a repeat of the first question. Do you think ChatGPT is friend, foe, or I don't know?
See if we've moved anybody on this.
In the opposite direction. Yeah.
Yeah.
A few less foes.
Well, as you can see, we are all proponents, and what we're going to do is put the contact information of all the panelists up so you can connect with us and have these conversations with us one-on-one, because everyone believes that everyone attending and everyone within higher ed should be leaning into these tools to keep up with your colleagues as the next months roll on. Chris, do you have any thoughts or final things you would like to share on behalf of Hannon Hill before we sign out?
Sure. Yeah. Thanks everybody for joining, being part of this discussion. I'm really grateful to all the speakers, Kyle, Troy, Caroline, and Bart, to share your knowledge. You're all big marketers in the higher ed industry, and I just thank you for your time and being part of this Hannon Hill webinar series.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Yeah, been great.
And I'll send out a recording of everything after the fact so everybody can watch it again. So you have a good day, and I'll see you soon.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.